Well, welcome today. I'm Tom Tessmer with the Harvest Group. I head up our Insights department, and we are going to be sharing with you some information we learned through a custom survey among Walmart shoppers with how they respond to out-of-stock issues. With me today is Michael Smith.
As Tom said, my name is Michael Smith. I lead up the personal care team at the Harvest Group.
And with that, we want to begin with giving you some context of what we did. There is a OSA paper that's being published in the near future that we went and conducted a primary internet study among about 1,250 shoppers, of which 1,000 of them were Walmart shoppers, to understand more about how do shoppers respond to out-of-stocks. We've heard a variety of information in the vendor world that we felt was fairly superficial or incomplete when it came to the shopper dimension to out-of-stocks. And so we conducted our research to learn two primary elements. One was to learn more about what's the emotional side of this, the softer side of experiencing an out-of-stock in a particular category. The other one was behaviorally, how exactly do shoppers respond when they go to a store, they're planning to buy a particular product, and that product is not available. What we learned is fairly interesting. To begin with, from an emotional standpoint, we surprisingly found that shoppers are willing, more than we would have anticipated, to forgive. That the vast majority of individuals, when they do experience an out-of-stock, indicated that it's not something that they hold against the retailer or the brand very often or for very long. When they do, though, that separates into a blame game that is 28% directed at the brand and 72% of the blame when an individual goes to a store and cannot buy the product they want is squarely placed on the retailer.
Tom, when we say forgive, the percentage of customers who forgive the retailer and the brand is at 80-20, 20-80?
Surprisingly, for a particular number, we found less than 10% of individuals specifically say they do not forgive. So 90% of individuals, when they have an out-of-stock, move on from the out-of-stock and say, hey, I forgive the event that took place. Now, interestingly, related to that, we found that about 1 in 3 individuals really forget the whole experience. So part of our study was to ask, what categories do you recall experiencing out of stock in the past? And interestingly enough, 1 in 3 people that we talked with said, I know I've experienced out of stocks, but I can't articulate exactly what category that out of stock was experienced in. So fortunately, from an emotional standpoint, it is largely forgive and forget. At the same time, we need to realize that out of stocks are not something that are new. And the reality is most people have learned to be very adaptive when it comes to how they handle out-of-stock issues. And so emotionally, this is something that most people anticipate happening and that they have adjusted their shopping behavior and their preferences knowing that an out-of-stock is an inherent part of the retail shopping experience. Now separate, of course, we wanted to learn more behaviorally what exactly happens when someone's at the shelf and the product that they want to buy is not there. And importantly, there are 2 major consequences from behaviors. The first one is a consequence to the brand. And of course, the other one is a consequence to the retailer. And that those can be very different. Our data specifically showed that %40 of the people in our survey, and at this point this is 40% of Walmart shoppers, indicate when they experience an out of stock that they will switch brands. Now it's important to note that we designed our study to be specific to categories. So this is not some generalized, oh, what happens if a brand's gone? This is the question of you went to buy diapers or you went to buy canned vegetables and that the product you wanted was not there. 40% of individuals hurt the brand because they go and say, I'm going to switch to a different brand, I'm going to switch to a different variant. And most importantly, this switching is really a function of, at least what we saw, was greater loyalty to the variant more than it is to the particular brand. So when we dug deeper into this, individuals said, I want to go and get the variant, so I want to get the flavor, I want to get the scent, I want to get the size that I prefer more than they're saying I want to stay within the brand and give up on that other variant.
One of the other interesting things I think that the data saw that we reviewed over the past couple of days is that when this customer shifts to another item, the most likely scenario is they stay on an equal parity in terms of price point or quality, but those who do shift up or down, they're 3 times more likely to shift down than they are to trade up. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting. Again, as you peel the data back and get away from some aggregated information, this switching does vary in a lot of different dimensions, but you're right. When the decision is to either spend more or less money, money's being lost from the category. Now, the second big behavior that we saw was the fact that 37% of these Walmart shoppers say that they're going to go to a different store. So they're going to switch the store. They're saying, I'm going to walk out of Walmart and not make a purchase. I'm going to go to another store to hopefully get that item that I want. Now, this, of course, sounds like a pretty dramatic decision in a lot of ways, but again, digging deeper into the information, what we really saw is there are some underlying behaviors among shoppers that make this not that big of an inconvenience. And those are the simple truth that the majority of shoppers do shop multiple stores in a given week. The fact that our data says about 40% of individuals claim that they actually go to multiple stores on the same shopping trip. And so the decision to not buy at Walmart really means it's just added to the shopping list of the next store that they plan to go to.
I think that's an interesting point because one of the key tenets of Walmart strategy is to carry the broadest assortment. So if you're a smaller supplier, most likely you're in Walmart, but you may not be in every other channel, right? You may not be in the local grocery, you may not be in the drugstore. So if Walmart is where you are only stocked in a market, and that's where that customer goes first for their stock-up trip, and Walmart doesn't have it, you don't have an option to get them when they go to that other channel, correct?
Correct.
Could be a scenario that plays out.
Absolutely. And now, one other novel data point with this is the reality is all these people that switch, there is a segment of them that actually go back and say that store I switched to is another Walmart store. So indirectly, Walmart, with their saturation in certain markets, actually have the ability to recover from that mistake by having them go to another one of another store in their chain. Now, third, and to be clear, the way that we gathered this data was not mutually exclusive. We didn't say which one of these 3 did you pick, but we did find that people broke out generally into one of these 3. Is that another 23% of individuals say that they delay consumption. And so this is really problematic, not just to the brand, not just to the retailer, but to both of them. And what does this really mean? From our standpoint, actually, the delayed consumption appears to be somewhat polarizing. That there is a surprising number of individuals that say, I don't need to make the purchase because I'm buying it in advance of actually needing it. So I'm not going to the store with an empty cupboard at home with the need to buy this product right away. The reality is a lot of people in the US have some perception of stocking up, at least across the 12 categories that we studied here. And so that delay is not always equating to fundamentally pulling volume out of the category.
So let me maybe make sure I understand that. When you say delay consumption, that means either they may work off the rest of their pantry at a slower pace, knowing that, well, I'm out and maybe I usually consume an ounce a day, I'll consume half an ounce a day, so this makes me to my next stock-up trip or next paycheck cycle. Or it may be a category where you've got low household penetration and it was something that they just tried and they've been new to the category for a while. It's not toothpaste, it's not detergent, it's not a everyday item that they technically could go without, and they may just opt out of the category altogether? Correct.
And oftentimes opting out of the category really was people saying, I'm going to substitute something else. So one of the categories we studied was canned vegetables. The reality is there's a variety of different items in that category and highly substitutable categories that they can still turn to that doesn't fundamentally drain the overall consumption within it. So overall, again, key learnings that we've had here is that emotionally, a surprising number of shoppers accept out of stocks as a necessary or realistic element to what they experience at stores. And behaviorally, both brands and retailers have significant threats related to out of stocks. That it comes from a switching standpoint at the item level, it comes from a switching standpoint at the store level, and the fact is that there is this element of delayed consumption which can shift out of the category, can cause people to ration the products that they do have at home, in lower penetration categories can be perhaps more of a threat. Now importantly, this is kind of aggregated. And one of the key elements that we wanted to test with our hypotheses was what categories really have the biggest issues here in certain areas, and what type of shopper profiles appear to be most important for us to understand. And what we learned is the most predictive element was age. That younger individuals behave very differently than older individuals when it comes to how they respond to this. Older individuals are more likely to have stocked up on items. They're actually more likely to indicate greater loyalty and less willingness to switch. Younger individuals seem to be a lot more fickle, that they will switch more readily, that they are more willing to walk away and delay consumption or exit a category. They are also the ones that are more digitally diverse. So they're the ones that are getting on their smartphone. They're the ones that will go and say, I'll order it online or pursue one of those measures in order to meet the demand that I have.
I think that's an interesting element for Walmart because as many of us know, they're highly focused on the millennial consumer and the gap that they have with their development on that customer group. So if I hear you right, there's a lot of kind of organic things with Walmart that are working against them with that shopper. And then as you add a dynamic of Walmart is perceived to be the worst offender in terms of the retail universe in terms of being out of stock, if that shopper is that much more likely to switch, it's kind of a compounding of a negative for Walmart trying to chase that customer group.
Absolutely. It's something that our goal with the research we did was to add additional flavor to what's being discussed related to this topic, and not necessarily answer everything definitively, but it says that there definitely needs to be further exploration there. The last thing I would really say is our design did specify category-specific answers. So there are 12 particular categories that we study that aggregate up to this level. The reality is what we found there definitely is variation in categories where people are more willing to switch items, in categories that people are more likely to switch stores, and in the categories that individuals are more likely to delay or postpone consumption in some manner. So a very complex issue here. We think that these data points are different and definitely contradict information that we've seen in the marketplace, and we hope that it adds to the conversation about going and solving this for both Walmart and for the vendor community.
All right, great presentation from Tom and Mike, and now we're gonna talk a little bit more about what you guys just talked about. I have a couple follow-up questions. First of all, what categories did you guys look at whenever you were doing your white paper?
Yeah, great question. I should have mentioned it sooner. Our goal was to really have a fairly representative sample, and so we chose categories based on ones that outside of diapers had fairly high penetration, were fairly regularly purchased, but then we wanted a variety of categories that had a lot of SKU proliferation versus categories that might have had fewer SKUs or fewer brands to pick from. And what it really resulted in is that we chose 12 categories that range from air fresheners and body wash to things like cereal and diapers and laundry detergent, pain relievers, pet food, potato chips, shampoo, toothpaste. Those are an example of how we tried to get a representative slice across specific categories.
Okay, and in listening to your presentation, obviously this is a big deal. 77% customers are going to either walk out or switch a brand. In your research, and we're going to be talking about Walmart specifically here, even though 37% of the retail or the shoppers are going to go to another outlet, doesn't Walmart ultimately stand to lose the most by not having on-shelf availability? And Mike, I'll go to you on that.
Yeah, I think definitely in the long term. If you think about the short-term behavior, the fact that the shopper may go ahead and trade down or trade up or pick another item in the category, which is the more likely scenario, that's definitely not as big of an issue that day for Walmart because they still close the sale. But that frustration, that discontent, the potential loss of loyalty leads to likely potential loss of traffic down the road. And that's the major issue right now for Walmart. How do they get traffic in the box? How do they maintain their trips? And I think that level of dissatisfaction could be a big contributing factor to future lack of trips and traffic.
Because as a shopper, I don't blame the brand when I go in to buy something that's not there. It's clearly not the brand's fault in my mind. It's Walmart's fault regardless of who may have messed up.
Definitely, I think that's what they told us. They said, majority of them will forgive and forget, but for those who don't, I think it was 3-1, those who blamed the retailer versus blaming the brand. So that long-term negative stigma seems to stick with the retailer versus the brand itself.
And another question is, who's really tasked at fixing this? Is it Walmart? Is it a supplier? Actually, before I get to that question, I wanted to go back to the younger audience. Because you said the millennials are really the ones who aren't so much brand loyal. They'll pick their iPhone up or their Android phone. They'll order it online. They'll go home. They'll hit Amazon. Walmart is struggling to get those the younger consumers in. So even what you just talked about, doesn't Walmart, is there more at play here for Walmart as a retailer?
Sure. No, I mean, I think it's a couple dynamics. One, Walmart wins with a stock-up trip. That audience isn't making as many stock-up trips. They're making fill-in trips. So when Walmart is getting the chance to get them in their door, it's critically important for them to let them know that we have what you're looking for. We can be your destination one-stop shop as they're building their families and evolving out of the college years and into household formation. And that's such a critical juncture with a shopper that they're already very underdeveloped on, and you could say the deck is stacked against them, that this is something for them to close that gap with the millennials they've got to get right.
Okay, so who's challenged with fixing this, supplier or Walmart?
Tom?
Well, actually, I was going to just add to the prior question for a second. This is where it's key to get beyond averages and look at in individual groups. And through the way that we cut the data, this older versus younger difference really surfaced. An example of just a dramatically different number is we asked individuals, when you have an out-of-stock experience, what do you initially do before you give up and say, okay, it must not be available anymore? And what we found is the most common response was to go and find an associate and ask them to validate it. But that most common response was almost twice as likely to be done by an older individual than a younger individual. So it's something like 70% of older individuals say, I'll go find an associate and have them try to help me find it. 30% of younger individuals do that. They'll assess the shelf or the aisle themselves and then walk away at that point. So that's an example of where there's maybe an opportunity to solve it in that manner, but it's a very different solution that can be made for an older person than for a younger person. Now, I would actually turn to you to probably answer some of the solution elements to the vendor versus Walmart.
Yeah, I think it's an and versus an or. I think both have ownership. And while we're releasing this research out on the white paper the coming next week, the following week we'll be releasing a white paper concerning contributing factors, whether it be topics such as Walmart's in-store processes and labor issues, which is largely outside of a supplier's control. I think they can be aware of and influence those, but there are a lot of topics within their control, such as how they configure their case packs, how they design the depth, width, length of their item, the way they bring that item to market, and other topics such as how they manage their in-store retail representation. Are they focused on setting promotions, or are they focused on helping you understand your out of stocks and how to fix them?
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Great information. And if you would like more information on this paper, you can link to it from the website, athanwalton.com. And they'll be back in next week to present the rest of this, or I guess a new white paper.
That's right.
So be sure to join us next Saturday morning. Thanks.